Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is March 14th, 2019. It's Happy Pi Day, 3.14, yada, 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 yada. It's a number that goes on forever and ever, but it's a magical number if you understand mathematics. It's fantastic. But that's not the point of today's story. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today. So I am going to do a brief follow-up on some of the college admissions scandal that I discussed yesterday, real briefly, and then an update to the Brexit soap opera that continues. And then, like I promised, we're definitely going to get into the Lisa Page testimony that was released, her behind-closed-door testimony that took place last year. And, of course, Lisa Page was a former attorney for the FBI, so getting some knowledge on what she knew, when, and who she worked with is quite important, as we may be entering March Madness with some fireworks coming in the near future. So just to touch base on this college admissions thing, yesterday I was talking about how it's a nothing burger at the end of the day, but I think it's part of a greater thread of stories that are sort of coming out into the media to sort of prepare us for the potential fireworks that I think may be coming to light in regards to a whole bunch of things that were discussed yesterday, how it might connect with the illegal immigration, the drug trafficking, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the Bob Kraft story with the quote-unquote massage parlor down in Florida, a whole host of other things that are coming to pass, the Me Too movement, Jussie Smollett, just this whole mantra, the fake news, things that the mainstream media puts aside, doesn't even talk about, all of these things that the president is starting to bring to light in sort of this drip, drip, drip method until drip, 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 and now you have a bucket full of water. So stay tuned for some of those things. But in regards to the college admission, just something I wanted to touch on. Let's also look at NCAA, the sports, okay? Because the sports, especially in regards to the football and the basketball, those are money makers. Those are huge money makers. We're talking billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. Some of these biggest universities with these huge football teams and huge basketball teams, you have coaches who are making millions of dollars. Millions of dollars to coach college sports. I mean, I personally think that's ridiculous. You can disagree. I mean, Americans, as well as many other people around the world, love sports, and that's fine. I get it. I'm a sports fan too. Not like I used to be. I think a lot of it is really, it's much too commercial now. It takes away from the essence of it, and I know a lot of people are attracted to college because there seems to be a little bit more of a personal passion in it as opposed to some of the more commercial aspects of professional sports, but I think it's really starting to trickle down into college as well. But we're talking about billions of dollars here, and we're looking to recruit the best of the best, quote-unquote, athletes at 18 years old, whether they be football players or basketball players primarily here. Those are the revenue-generating sports that we're talking about. So is there not funny business taking place? Every once in a while, you do get a story that comes out that, yeah, there was some bribes on the other side, because now it's the university paying the student or a relative of the student or the parents of the student, or now they have a Mercedes-Benz or a, Cadillac Escalade or something like that. Is that not a bribe? What's going on there? Is that allowed? No, it's not until they get caught, obviously. And then you have some of the other things that go even further. So you have these athletes, predominantly male athletes, obviously. Well, what do you think that leads to? Well, we're going to take you, we're going to send you to a nice party, and then we're going to put you up in a 5-star hotel. Maybe some strip clubs. Maybe we're going to send some high-end escorts to your room at this 5-star hotel. Now you really want to come to this university, don't you, young man? And of course he says yes. Of course he says yes. This is what takes place. And I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg of what happens. So again, with my story yesterday in this regards, just open it up. Just open the floodgates. At least that way we're honest about it. Don't put on a face that you are being righteous and moral and ethical, and you're just saying, you know what, we have a great program here at yada yada university. You're going to get a great education. The staff here at the athletic department is fantastic. The coaches are going to train you to be the best athlete you can be. The professors are world-renowned. yada, yada, yada. You give them that whole spiel. They don't care about that. They want the money, they want the girls, and that's it. So just say it. Now, of course, do you have an academic who's also an athlete? Yeah, sure, you got a couple of them. But most of them are not, and most of them are coming from low-income families, or definitely not that type of lifestyle where you just have everything thrown at you, all of this money, all of this fame, because if you're going to a major university, you're going to be on TV. You're going to be talked about. Is he a Heisman Trophy candidate? Is he going to make it to the pros? He has all these people gunning for him. He's got agents, marketers, Nike, Adidas, Under Armour waiting in the wings just to shower him with gifts. I mean, to throw that onto an 18-year-old is overwhelming, and rightly so. But here's the question, because here's the thing that bothers me. I would say that that's unethical to do that, but then these universities have the audacity to teach ethics. So you square that circle and you let me know how you do that. I don't want to get caught up on that story because we got a lot of other news, but I wanted to mention that because it's one thing to talk about parents who are desperately trying to get their students into school and are bribing academic administrators or athletic directors, whatever the case may be. Again, I really don't care. This is just what people do. Let's just be honest about it. And if you got to put an asterisk next to your name that, hey, mommy and daddy paid a big check to get me into this university, go ahead. Who cares? Now on to the Brexit story. Well, the MPs have voted by 413 to 202, a majority of 211 votes for Prime Minister Theresa May to ask the EU for a delay to Brexit. Who's surprised? Not us, because we knew that if the can could be kicked down further, it was going to be kicked down further down the road, wasn't it? So there is no surprise. Okay, it means the UK may now not leave on March 29th as previously planned. We know this. Mrs. May says Brexit could be delayed by 3 months to June 30th if Parliament backs her deal in a vote next week. Remember, I alluded to that in a previous podcast that there may be another vote by March 20th. If they reject her deal again, then she says she will seek a longer extension, but any delay has to be agreed by the 27 other EU member states. So here we go. This deal was struck down in January. It was struck down just the other day. They voted no deal Brexit off the table, and now they voted for Article 50 for this extension to take place. The other thing that's interesting is, well, it might be extended to June 30th, which is 90 days. 3 months, 90 days. I don't know what the fascination is with these politicians and bureaucrats with 90 days. I mean, that was the U.S.-China trade talks. Well, we'll just give it another 90 days. We'll see what happens in 3 months. Evidently, 3 months is the Goldilocks period. Not too hot, not too cold. If we can't resolve it in 3 months, well, hey, what are we going to do? They didn't get this done in 2.5 years. We'll see what happens in 3 months. But it ain't good. And again, if they put this vote back to a second referendum, I am telling you, the British people, they better revolt. But here's another little twist in this story. If you follow this, you have the SNP, the Scottish National Party, which is part of UK Parliament, on behalf of the Scottish people. The Scottish people joined the United Kingdom with the understanding that they would remain within the European Union, because the European Union is popular with the Scottish people, and the vast majority of the Scottish people voted in the referendum to remain in the EU. So now you have a process that is underway here where you have Brexit, which means that the Scottish people would also be leaving the EU. So now you have calls that there might be a vote in Scotland to regain their independence and go solo and potentially remain in the EU. So now you have all of these other dynamics taking place in the background. So I told you this was an interesting story. This isn't just something happening across the pond, and I know there's not a lot of discussion that takes place here in the mainstream media. We'd rather focus on sports and the Kardashians and that type of stuff, which I know is extremely fascinating, but that's what we tend to focus on. So when you get hit in the head with a frying pan that I see coming at us like it's straight in our face, you can't be surprised. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to wake people up, let them look over the hill, see what's coming our way, so you're not surprised by a lot of the things that are taking place and what I think is going to take place. And I'm always happy to admit if and when I'm wrong. Always happy to admit if and when I'm wrong, and always happy to pat myself on the back too, as a lot of people are, when we're right. But it does depend on the instance, because a lot of the things I talk about are not the most rosy and optimistic. And so while I see those things taking place, there is most definitely a part of me that hopes that I'm wrong, because it's not going to be pretty for a lot of people. But it's my job to speak the truth as I see it. And that's what you're always going to get from me, whether you like it or not. Now, on to the Lisa Page, I don't even know what you want to call this, testimony. I wanted to say debacle almost, but that's just the grander scheme of things. It's a big debacle with Trump-Russia collusion and all this nonsense. This was released, the transcripts. It's not entirely redacted, but the vast majority of it is. And it's about 165 pages. Obviously, we're not going to have enough time to go through all of it, nor am I going to bore you with all of the details of it. But I do want to read from this transcript because I think it's important. And so just let me read some of this to you. But before I do, just let me set the stage for this. So the part that I'm going to focus on now, and I may focus on some other parts in later podcasts, but at least for this one, this has to do with Miss Page and Trey Gowdy, the former congressman from South Carolina. They're back and forth during this testimony. And in particular, it was in regards to Hillary Clinton and the email server investigation. So this has some back and forth with some of the text messages that took place between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok of the FBI. And of course, you know, that name should be familiar to you because the president is always tweeting about these two. These are the two lovers. Remember, he always says one way or the other, Lisa Page was texting her lover, Peter Strzok, or Peter Strzok was texting his lover, Lisa Page. Always that back and forth. I mean, man, does he know how to stick his finger in an open wound. I mean, love him or hate him, it is entertaining when he tweets on some of those things. So with the stage set, let me kick this off, and this is going to open with Miss Page. So as I discussed at length in the IG report, there's a great deal of context here that needs to be put to put this in context. And in fact, there are easily a half dozen emails and other text messages all sort of surrounding this time frame. And again, this has to deal with Hillary Clinton and the email investigation. Pretty early on, or actually right around this time in the investigation, almost every interview had been conducted the way FBI interviews are regularly conducted, with two agents, maybe a prosecutor or two, but generally two agents and one or two prosecutors. As soon as the planning started to begin to interview some of the more high-profile witnesses, not just Mrs. Clinton, but also Uma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, Jake Sullivan, and her sort of core team, the department wanted to change the sort of structure and the number of people who were involved. And the FBI did not agree with that. That's important. And the FBI did not agree with that. We thought this is the way we normally do things. This is the way, as you well know, sir, as a prosecutor. So just to step back real quickly, I am reading this verbatim, so sometimes, obviously, when people talk, they hesitate, they stutter, they go back and forth, they take things in other directions. So I'm just going to read this as written, okay? Let me continue with Miss Page. I was a former prosecutor for 6 years as well. A more effective interview is conducted with a smaller group, and you build a better rapport. And so we felt strongly that we should maintain the same procedure that we had maintained, which was two prosecutors, two agents, and this represents kind of the middle of a fight that had been happening preceding this date and following this date about how many personnel should be present for these high-profile interviews. Back to Mr. Gowdy. Who specifically at the department advocated for a different way of interviewing what you refer to as high-profile? David Loffman. David Loffman, she replies. Remember these names. I know it's hard to remember all these names, but just remember that name, David Loffman. Mr. Gowdy. Anyone else? No, not to my knowledge. And if I understood the context of your answers, at least someone at the Bureau, maybe you, but someone at the Bureau questioned why you would treat some witnesses differently from the way you treated other witnesses. Miss Page. No, actually, the whole team. So it wasn't just Miss Page who was questioning why all of a sudden are we going to interview these high-profile witnesses differently. It was the whole FBI team, according to Miss Page. Let me continue, Miss Page. To the best of my knowledge, everybody at the FBI felt that we should proceed with the higher profile interviews, including for Mrs. Clinton, in the same way that we always had. David Loffman felt strongly that he needed to be present for these high profile interviews. And so that then cascaded. Well, if he's going to be there, should we have Peter, if she's referring to Peter Strzok, or someone else sort of higher ranking than the sort of line agents and line prosecutors who were conducting the investigation? Okay, so it continues. It continues with some hierarchical things just in the FBI. I'm not going to bore you with all those details, but it gets a little juicier when we continue further down in this process. Now, this goes back to Mr. Gowdy. Drawing on your background as prosecutor and as counsel for the Bureau, what is operationally necessary about having other potential fact witnesses attend an interview? Miss Page, I do not know. I would agree with you that it is not typically appropriate or operationally necessary to have fact witnesses attend the interview. Pay attention to this. This is important here. Mr. Gowdy, do you know whether any potential fact witnesses attended the interview? We'll start with Secretary Clinton. Miss Page, it's my understanding that both Cheryl Mills and I think Heather Samuelson attended her interview. Mr. Gowdy, who made the decision to allow them to be present? Somebody at the department, I don't know whom. Back to Mr. Gowdy. And when you say the department, you're distinguishing the department from the Bureau? Miss Page, yes, I'm sorry. I will always call the Bureau the FBI or the Bureau, and the department the Justice Department or the department. Mr. Gowdy, were potential fact witnesses allowed to sit in any of the other universe of interviews where things were done differently? Miss Page, not to my knowledge. Mr. Gowdy, so the best of your knowledge, it was only her interview, her being Hillary Clinton, where potential fact witnesses were allowed to sit in. Miss Page, that's correct. Mr. Gowdy, now as a former prosecutor, I'm sure that struck you as being highly irregular. Miss Page, we all at the FBI disagreed with it. And I recall both lawyers for the FBI calling over to the prosecutors, and I am certain that Pete called over to the prosecutors to say, this is BS. I'm sure is probably how he would have phrased it. Like, why are they attending? And the answer that we received back was that they did not have they didn't see a legal basis to exclude them from the interview because Secretary Clinton was representing them as her lawyers. Okay, so let me just pause out of this real quick here. Hillary Clinton was given a different treatment. According to Lisa Page, she didn't like the fact that Mrs. Clinton was getting a different treatment, nor, according to this testimony, did the entire team in the FBI appreciate the fact that Mrs. Clinton was being treated differently. On top of that, not only was she treated differently with just having more people from the DOJ and FBI involved in the interview, but she was allowed to have fact witnesses during her testimony, during her, I should say, her conversation with DOJ and FBI officials. She was able to have her right-hand women, Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson, there with her during that testimony, during that witness interview. Okay, let me get back here, because we're going to circle around to this. Mr. Gowdy, had she been interviewed in a compulsory setting, would she have been allowed to have fact witnesses present? Miss Page, I don't think that makes a difference. Well, I am sorry. Do you mean like a grand jury? Mr. Gowdy, yeah, like a grand jury. Miss Page, in a grand jury, she wouldn't have anybody present. Mr. Gowdy, right, including your lawyer. Miss Page, she would not be permitted to have any lawyer present. That's correct. Right. So that's just important for background because they're agreeing with the legal process of how things take place. This is very unorthodox. Had this been something a little bit more formal to the stages of a grand jury, she wouldn't have had anybody there to guide her either, which is really what we're talking about here, that she was being guided or coached by having Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson there. And the other thing that's interesting, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later as we continue the conversation, but is this a loophole? Have the Clintons found a loophole within the law? If you commit a crime with your attorneys, I guess it all falls under attorney-client privilege, so nobody's going to rat on each other. Is that what they found out here? Because Cheryl Mills was what, the chief of staff for Secretary Clinton, and Heather Samuelson was somebody, an important aide to her, and obviously Uma Abedin was as well. I mean, those were the three amigas that were really, always around each other. So, I mean, they're also all attorneys. Well, they were just my attorneys on this. No, they weren't my attorneys on that. But if it has anything to do with me potentially being in trouble, yeah, that's my attorney. Is that a legal loophole? Is that what it is? I mean, where are the defense attorneys using this Clinton defense mechanism, this Clinton defense argument? Because there's no doubt that there are people that the federal government is going after right now that has to deal with classified information. So why don't they have the cojones to go up and say, look, the Clintons got away with it. Why can't my client get away with it? You understand what I'm saying here? This is the two-tiered justice system that we obviously have in this country. Obviously have. If you're a Republican or a conservative, you're skewered, you're done, you're toast. Maybe if you're a liberal, you might be able, you still might get in trouble. Probably not as much trouble, but maybe. But if your name's Clinton, just wash your hands of it. You didn't do nothing wrong. You couldn't do anything wrong. All right, so I'm going to continue with this. So now I skipped through a couple other pages. Again, they were just going through process. Now, this is back to Mr. Gowdy. I'm going based on memory here because I don't have the text in front of me. And if you don't recall it, then we'll get somebody to pull it up for us. But I have in the vague recesses of my memory a text you either sent or received that referred to Loretta Lynch as something other than a profile in courage. And Loretta Lynch was the former Attorney General for President Obama. Miss Page. Yep, I remember that one, Mr. Gowdy. Would that have been in connection with her decision to recuse herself? Miss Page. Right. So that was in response to the Tarmac episode. And as I said, also from memory, so this may be off a little bit, but my recollection is that she presented publicly that she would defer to the judgments or the recommendations of the career prosecutors, and I think my text said something to the effect of, it's a real profile in courage, since she knows no charges would be brought. Did you hear this, ladies and gentlemen? It's a real profile in courage, since she knows no charges would be brought. How did she know? Who told her? What was going on? I continue. This is Miss Page. At this point, this is late or early July, and so that does represent a presumption on my part. I do not have knowledge, actual personal knowledge, that she knew no charges would be brought. But every single person on the team, whether FBI or DOJ, knew far earlier than July that we were not going to be able to make out sufficient evidence to charge a crime. And so that was my supposition, but I don't actually know that she knew that. Two-tiered justice system or what? They were already making a decision. The FBI, according to Miss Page, the DOJ, already knew that they were not going to charge Secretary Clinton with a crime of mishandling classified information, either with intent or with gross negligence. None. Period. They knew it was gone. Nothing. And then she's making a rational assumption that Loretta Lynch didn't know any better, but it really didn't make any difference because she half-assed recused herself and said, I'm, not formally recusing myself, which is something Jeff Sessions did for President Trump with the Russia collusion nonsense. But she just sort of backed up, washed her hands of it, and said, I'm just going to defer judgment to the career professionals at the FBI and the prosecutors at the Department of Justice. And of course, well, according to Miss Page, she already knew what the decision was. They weren't going to prosecute. And of course, we have that day where former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, comes out, throws the book at Mrs. Clinton, said she's guilty of blah, 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 XYZ, but we're not going to prosecute because we don't have any reasonable prosecutors in here who would bring charges against Hillary Clinton. I wonder if we just supplanted your name for Hillary Clinton's, if the FBI and the DOJ would have brought charges against you. I think that probably would have happened. I mean, look what they did with Mr. Manafort. Again, the man's not above the law, but they never would have prosecuted him for these cases if he had not been associated with President Trump. This is getting very dangerous. This is getting very 1984 here. This is very much the path of socialism and communism that is very frightening because you have a two-tier justice system and you have some people who are more equal than others. And that is very, very frightening. It is a very slippery slope. And if you're going to go after one, you go after the other. And I pray to God they go after this woman, the Clintons, and everybody else who's guilty of this crap. And I don't care if that's the president. I don't care if he's guilty of it. Nobody is above the law. Nobody. But this is just disgusting. Because we have a Justice Department that wants to say and talk about integrity. Well, they knew they weren't going to charge this woman. And let's just look at some of the facts, by the way. And let me just backtrack because, well, how did we even find out about the email server and all that stuff? Okay, you have the watchdog group Judicial Watch. Some of you, I'm sure, are aware of Judicial Watch. The president, Tom Fitton, he goes out on the media every once in a while. I typically will only see him on Fox News. That's not to say he doesn't get airtime on other stations, but I really have only ever seen him on Fox News, and I do try my best to watch all the other stations as well, just to get as much opinion as we can to see what's going on out there. But anyway, if it wasn't for Judicial Watch, we never would have known that Hillary Clinton had a private email server in her home in New York in her bathroom. Okay? Not when she's, just wife of Bill, mother of Chelsea, grandmother to her grandchildren, as Secretary of State. Okay? Classified information, emails, highest secrets of the U.S. government, that type of stuff. In her home, in New York, in her bathroom. Well, how did Judicial Watch come about this? Well, they didn't know. They found it by accident. They were looking through FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act request. They were looking for documents that had to deal with the Benghazi Libya terror attack, which is a whole other can of beans for the Obama administration and for Hillary Clinton. Because remember, they made up a bogus story, which came out in the Freedom of Information Act request. This was on September 11th, 2012, a couple months before a presidential election, President Obama versus Mitt Romney. Okay? So this is a couple minutes before go time. Vote. Who are you going to vote for? All right? You have a terrorist attack on September 11th. Americans are dead, including a U.S. ambassador in Benghazi, Libya. And we are told by the White House, Susan Rice went out. You remember this? She did all of the Sunday morning shows. She went out there in full force telling the American people and the rest of the world that this was a spontaneous uprising in regards to some video. Well, that turned out not to be true. Big surprise. And Hillary Clinton, she got in line and she knew what to say and she perpetuated the lie as well. You have Americans dead. You have a U.S. ambassador dead. You have families and Americans who want to know what happened. And we have our government at the highest levels lying to us. Do you understand why these people want to drain the swamp? Why there's a distrust of institutions? Do you understand my disdain and contempt for institutions of power and authority? Because this is what they do. They lie and they abuse their power, whether because it's tempting or these people are just sick or some combination thereof. Makes no difference. Kick them out. Kick them out. We're supposed to be in charge, not them. How are we supposed to make educated guesses and educated decisions if we're being lied to and given terrible, terrible information? So to this day, there still has never been a mea culpa or a whole unraveling of the truth, but there's a lot of speculation that this had to do with the U.S. moving weapons through Libya, up through Turkey to get into Syria so that the United States of America could arm either ISIS or Al-Qaeda or both. You get this? You get how sick this is? That's the speculation. To arm our quote-unquote enemies. That's what we were doing. And you know who was also in the middle of all this stuff, and don't be surprised if this name starts coming back around again too, is John McCain, Senator John McCain of Arizona. He was right in the middle of this. There was never, in my opinion, any country or militant group that John McCain didn't want to arm. He wanted to give weapons to everybody. I mean, he was in the pockets of the military-industrial complex as much as you say. Okay? That's who he was. He's no hero in my book. What he did in Vietnam, okay, maybe. But what he did in his career after the fact, no. He's as deep state and as swampy, if you will, as it gets. As it gets. May he rest in peace, though. Now, some of the other facts that you have to recall from Hillary Clinton and why the FBI and the DOJ prosecutors didn't think they could go after this is beyond me. So we know that she had a server in her home in New York in her bathroom. We know that after being subpoenaed for these emails, 33,000 of them were deleted. 33,000 emails after receiving a subpoena were deleted. This would be akin to a drug dealer flushing cocaine down the toilet. One would say, well, Pablo Escobar knew he was in trouble. The police are in the house. They are raiding the house with a search warrant, and he is trying to hide as much evidence as possible. Why? Because he knows he committed a crime by having cocaine in his house. Hillary Clinton, after subpoena, deletes 33,000 emails, which she claims had to deal with yoga and her daughter's wedding plans. This woman did not do yoga, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. Is that not intent of a crime that she knew that she was doing something wrong? I think it probably is. I think it probably is. No, don't get me wrong. Maybe she went to yoga class. I don't know. Bill Clinton probably went to yoga class, not to be a participant, but to be a spectator. I'm sure he went to some women's yoga classes. Hillary Clinton, I have my doubts, but maybe. So not only that, remember this was the whole bleach thing. They bleached the emails, and of course when she was a candidate, she was saying, "What do you mean? Like with a rag? We got rid of them, we cleaned them, we swiped them clean. You know, I mean, like with a rag? Come on, how can people buy her BS? It's unbelievable, unbelievable." And then the other thing that you have to remember is, I believe, if memory serves me correct, it was a company out of Colorado who was responsible for that server, maintaining that server. Well, there was classified documents on that server, no questions, ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was even stated by Jim Comey when he was throwing the book at Hillary Clinton, and that was also during his testimony under Trey Gowdy when Jim Comey was called before Oversight or Judiciary Committee, and Trey Gowdy asked him point blank, and Jim Comey told the truth. Yeah, there was classified information on her servers back and forth, emailing to this person and that person. Of course there was. But there was no guilt. There was no problem. Nothing like that. So my question is, in regards to the company from Colorado, knowing that there was top secret classified information being transmitted on this server, did that company have access to those emails? I mean, if they're the IT who's responsible for it, I mean, they probably have access if they got to go in there and do something. So the next question is, do they have clearance from the federal government to look and to handle that type of information? I highly doubt it. So here we go. We got a two-tiered system of justice. The Clintons continue to skate. And then, in regards to the Lisa Page testimony, she brought up Loretta Lynch in the tarmac meeting. Remember grandkids and golf? I have no doubt that Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton talked about their grandkids and golf. I mean, what's it take? 2 seconds? Hey, Loretta, how's the grandkids? No, they're doing well. How about yours, Bill? They're doing well. And now let's get to the real goodies. Let's talk about the real meat and potatoes here. What did they do? I don't know. Was Loretta Lynch promised a Supreme Court position if she backed off, or to remain on as Attorney General if Hillary becomes the president? I mean, what was the pay for play here? What was going on? I mean, that's the MO for the Clintons. But here's the other thing that I think is interesting, because remember, we were told Bill Clinton was golfing out there in Arizona, and just by happenstance, he happened to come across Loretta Lynch on the tarmac. Well, here's a question for you. He still has Secret Service protection. You and I pay for that Secret Service protection. That means it's a public good. Why can't we file FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, to see where, in fact, Bill Clinton was that day, because he'd have to have Secret Service detail. Where was he? What was he doing? I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is going to unravel on its own, but I mean, why was that never brought up? I mean, I'm no detective, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I mean, it seems to me, Secret Service, they should be under FOIA. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's some sort of executive privilege. I don't know. But you would think at this point in time, I mean, he hasn't been president for going on 20 years. What's going on here? What's going on here? So we have a two-tiered justice system. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have a drug dealer who would flush the cocaine down the toilet during a raid. You have Hillary Clinton, and they would have had the book thrown at him, locked up, and rightly so. And then you have Hillary Clinton under subpoena, deletes 33,000 emails, but there's no intent. There's nothing. And just lastly, just lastly, because this goes back to Judicial Watch, because Judicial Watch remains vigilant on this, and they are continuing to go after this. And the email investigation is not over. It's far from over, because the State Department continues to slow roll the document dump that they are supposed to do. And the judge who is overseeing this is none too happy, because there have been delays and there has been some, I don't know if it's flat out lies, but the judge is not happy with how the State Department and other government lawyers presumably lied to him about certain documents and access to documents and the timeline as to when they could get these documents out to Judicial Watch. But Judicial Watch makes the case that Hillary Clinton damn well knew that she was subverting FOIA, and that was the intent. That's why she actually put this in her house in New York, in her bathroom, to subvert FOIA requests. Because this woman, come on, she's intelligent. She should know the inner workings of government, right? I mean, she was criticizing candidate Trump up and down that he had no experience and she had all this experience. So she should have known about FOIA. So Judicial Watch makes the argument that she did this on purpose to subvert FOIA. I say maybe. I say that might be part of it, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, because the other question goes to, well, she had top secret information on these servers in her home, in New York, in her bathroom. Were these emails ever hacked? Okay, listen to me, hacked. This is a key word, okay? Well, you have the statements by the FBI and others that we have no evidence that suggests that this server was in fact hacked. Okay, let's just for the sake of argument take them for their word that there was no evidence of a hack. What happens if Hillary Clinton set this up to give some other nation these emails? You see what I'm getting at? Hacked implies against your will, that you didn't mean to do this, that somebody broke in. What happens if she gave them the password? Pay for play? Highest spy maybe ever in American history? Is that what was going on here? I think it might have been. Now, that's speculation on my part, but I think Judicial Watch is most definitely correct that she wanted to subvert FOIA requests. And she would have gotten away with this under a couple of situations if Judicial Watch never filed FOIA requests for Benghazi, or if Hillary Clinton had become president. Because this would have been done already, because the FBI, DOJ, they already dismissed it. They said there's nothing here. And if Hillary Clinton was the president, God help us, she would have buried this. We would never see the light of day on any of this. So now, because we have President Trump as the president, we might actually have a chance for this two-tier justice system to actually be equal justice under the law that applies to everybody. I hope and I pray that that's the case. As more things come to light, I will keep you guys updated. I will continue to make my way through this transcript and see if there's something else to talk about. And if there is, I will most definitely bring that up in subsequent podcasts. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you as always. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out. This is the Capitol News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.